Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's the Flintstones, The Rescue of Dino and Hoppy, brought to us by Taito. The Rescue of Dino and Hoppy, the more common of the two NES Flintstones titles, not only a great platformer, but definitely one of those games I loved as a child. The Flintstones, of course, one of the most influential cartoons of all time, airing during prime time hours, having some of the highest ratings of that era, that would also go on to entertain and influence generation after generation, including still being aired in syndication today. Taito did a great job of bringing the Flintstones and its license over to the NES. Based on the entire run of the Flintstones, as you can tell with the inclusion of Gazoo, the alien from another world that was introduced in the last season of the Flintstones and is actually considered one of the jump the shark moments for the series. But having him in the NES game actually gives a nice little twist and actually adds some cool things to the game. So here we go with the Flintstones, The Rescue of Dino and Hoppy for the NES. As you can see, the story has Dr. Butler coming to Bedrock, traveling from the 30th century, kidnapping Dino and Hoppy for a futuristic zoo. He blasts back off into the future and also destroys Gazoo's time machine. So our goal in the game is to rescue, of course, Dino and Hoppy, but to do so we're going to have to first rebuild the time machine. As each level progresses, you are able to build a little bit more of the time machine until it's fully built and you can travel to the future to face off with Dr. Butler. For the NES, Flintstones is a very colorful and pretty well done game. The sprites all look pretty much how you would expect them to look. Fred looks very well done, and the animation in the character alone, I think, adds some great detail to the game. Of course, Fred has his mighty club that he's using in order to destroy enemies throughout the game, and you can also just use your normal attack or charge up the power with the club in order to do damage. Now don't worry, there's also some other abilities that we get later on, including other weaponry and other things that we're able to use with Fred in order to help us out. Early on, we're able to use the club charged up to launch ourselves all the way over this mountain to get to the first boss. Start off by running up close to him and knock him twice. As you can see, a little bit of an explosion happens every time you deliver damage to him. After delivering 2 hits, immediately run away from him to avoid the flame. Then get back in close and keep repeating the process. For the first boss, of course, it's a pretty simple fight, and won't take too many hits to take him out and complete the first level of Dino and Hoppy. After completing a stage, you then actually come out to a map screen. Here we can actually go to several different levels, including a nice little bonus minigame that you can complete. The minigame is actually a basketball game. You have to use Fred's abilities in order to steal the ball from the enemy, and then throw it into the giant pelican-type prehistoric creature on the right side in order to gain points. For every shot you make, you end up getting 2 points, and as you can see, there's a timer running down at the bottom. When the timer, of course, reaches 0, the game is over, and if Fred has enough points and ends up having more than his opponent, he ends up winning. While definitely not something very overly complicated by any means, it's a nice little distraction, and one of those cool little extras they have in the game. For the most part though, keeping the ball away from your opponent ends up being rather simple, as you can pretty much just work in a giant square-like pattern over and over again to keep avoiding him, and he'll keep trying to chase you down, but you'll just be able to keep running and reversing your directions in order to avoid him. Most of the time I just end up scoring maybe 1 or 2 shots, and then pretty much just keep running around the level until the time ends up expired. After firing my last shot and going up 8-0, the time has finally expired here, and we can move on to the next level. Now, the guy does say I lost, and I'll give you what I promised, and unfortunately though, I'll be honest, I don't know what he ends up giving you. When I end up making it to the next level, I still have the same amount of lives, I don't have any more power overall, the same amount of coins, and the same amount of energy. Maybe he ends up replenishing your energy if you had a hit done to you, but I'm not positive on that. At the beginning of the level, we're introduced to a thief enemy. Be careful of them as they're ducking in doorways, and jump over the bullets they may fire out at you. You can also break open some of the barrels that are laying around and get the tomahawk. Now, to use the tomahawk, you just hit up and A in order to use it, and it ends up doing a pretty decent ranged attack, allowing you to hit enemies above you or far away. Also be sure to pick up the power upgrades from the hamburgers. By doing so, you'll end up getting an increased power meter, and you'll be able to do more damage at a fully charged up ability with your club. Also, by climbing up these trees, we end up finding a stake item. The stake ends up giving you another heart to your energy meter, so now we have 4 hearts of damage we can totally take. Here we also find the slingshot item. You can use this in order to also hit ranged enemies, though not as good maybe as the tomahawk. It's still a nice little weapon, and you use it the same way as the tomahawk. Take out a couple jumping enemies and then fall down here in order to move on to the next segment. Here you'll be on a floating boat, and you'll have to ride on this boat while also moving along and jumping over platforms that may get in your way. You'll have to use the hanging ability that Fred has in order to jump up ledges of platforms in order to pull yourself up sometimes in order to get higher up so you can avoid getting squashed or knocked into the water below. I'm sure you also noticed we picked up another one of the sub-weapons, this time being the egg bomb. Using this weapon is kind of like a grenade. Putting it out there after a few seconds it will explode, being able to take out any nearby enemies. Upon here on this platform, take out a couple of these green dinosaurs, but also hit the barrel as we'll find another one of the stakes, giving us now 5 hearts to our health meter. Once outside, we'll have to jump up on these bones in order to avoid falling down to the spikes. There's going to be a couple of giant birds coming at you, but you can easily swat them out of the air with your club. Just a little bit farther right, you end up running into Wilma. You'll run into other different characters from the Flintstones throughout, and they give you a little bit of message before you end up continuing on. They also usually end up giving you a sub-weapon, and it does replace the one you currently have, which is a little bit annoying. But usually they end up giving you one that may help you out on the next boss battle. Here we have the tomahawk, and we can throw that from a good distance in order to hit this guy with a giant mallet. This guy I end up finding even easier than the first boss. If he gets close to you when he lands, he will swing that mallet at you, but you can hit him from a distance with both the club and the tomahawk. Doing a full charged up power shot with the club will do a ton of damage to him, and after only 2 or 3 charged up hits, he'll be taken care of when we move on to the next level, and we also build a little bit more of the time machine. Though I'm not positive if you have to actually complete every area of the map, it is time for another one of the basketball minigames. Now this one's just the exact same as the one before, it ends up not being really any more difficult. The other guy will start immediately with the ball, and you can use the butt bump of Fred's here in order to actually attack him and steal the ball away from him. Then you can just go around running around in the square like before and score whenever you actually do feel like it in order to gain some points, and then just wait for the time to eventually expire. It does take a while, but eventually the time will expire and I win 2-0. We move on to the next level, the Ice World. Now being an ice-themed level in a platforming game, as you can expect, you're going to be slipping and sliding all over the ice platforms. Be careful not to run into some of the enemies, and if you're getting too close to an enemy, you can always swing that club in order to take them out and get rid of them easily. After a little bit of the level and just a few enemies, we end up running into Betty. After a short conversation with Betty, we end up getting the slingshot. Just like with Wilma, it does end up replacing the weapon we have, but unfortunately we have to do that. Before moving upwards, head all the way over to the right to grab an extra life as well as the egg bomb. You can then get on the rotating platform and it'll spin rather quickly, but you'll be able to use that in order to jump up to the platform above. There's a giant cloud enemy who I end up finding pretty funny. Take him out with a simple club shot and then work your way down the stairs. Once down here, you'll have to be very careful of the spikes in the ceiling. For Fred, he actually ducks down by just putting his head inside his shirt, but don't worry, you won't have to do that to avoid the spikes above you. You're just going to have to be cautious when making your jumps. Continue along the icy platforms, swinging at any enemy in your path. You have the blue snail-like dinosaurs, they are easily destroyed, but then the other guys, you'll have to hit them and immediately walk over them before they end up reforming. Here, get a nice little running start and then duck down with Fred in order to slide underneath all the spikes. Take out one more enemy and then it's time for a giant battle against a giant red mammoth. Just like the other bosses, we're going to be using our fully powered up club here in order to easily take out the boss. He moves really slowly, and you can just keep mashing the club after a full charge up with it, and after 2 or 3 hits actually with it, he'll be taken care of. We move on to the next level, and we end up getting some satellite dishes added to the time machine. The next level of the game is kind of a deep jungle-themed level. We see some of the same enemies we started off seeing in some of the other levels. Start off by moving up the couple of platforms and climb up a couple of ledges to the waterfall above here. When moving across these logs, you'll have to be careful. When you land on them, they do start to sink down, so you'll have to quickly jump off of them and keep moving. The same goes for the platforms being held up by the pterodactyls. Just move quickly and you'll have no issue. Next up, you have the very long back of a dinosaur you actually get to climb up, which is a cool little effect, before making it to a waterfall with actual moving logs. You can easily jump across them and then drop down, take out this flower before attempting to jump up. These snake enemies that you'll see wrapped around trees have a very long reach, so be careful and slowly inch towards them, wait for them to stick their head out before you actually attack. After a couple of saber-toothed tigers, you end up running into Barney. Barney gives you a little bit of a hint for what's coming up, and then you're able to continue on. Attack the snake from the ground before you actually jump up to the platform it's on. Grabbing onto these swinging platforms can be a little bit tricky because you'll have to jump on them at an exact point, but it really overall isn't bad and they're kind of lenient on where you can grab. We'll do a nice little cool slide animation, launching Fred over all the way to the right side, and then you'll have to climb up the waterfall. Jumping to the platforms as the logs slowly come down, it really isn't too tricky, especially with the ability of Fred to be able to latch onto ledges. Then jump onto one more log as it's blasting up into the sky. After getting launched up into the sky, you'll be on another big platform. Start off by charging up your big club ability, then walk close to the giant Sasquatch and immediately hit him with the club. There are coconuts that fall down from the ceiling, and you can use them, like Barney says, in order to actually hit into him, but I end up finding it a lot easier just to stay close to him and keep mashing him with the club. He jumps really slowly, so you can easily avoid him, and just keep doing a charged up hit to take him out. Here we have one more basketball minigame before we're able to continue on to the next level. Just like before, it's the same difficulty. Attack the guy immediately, steal the ball, and then run around as much as possible, just draining that clock out. After what seems like forever, we end up winning the game again and we move on to the next level. Next up is the Haunted Castle themed level, and what would any platformer be without a Haunted Castle stage? Now, starting off in here, you will have, of course, bats coming at you. You'll also have different pitfalls and terrors, such as the giant rocks that will come crashing down whenever you get underneath of them. But, of course, just moving quickly, you'll be able to avoid taking any squash damage. There's a few different platforms for you to climb up here, but we're going to climb the one immediately above us and head over to the right. The skeletons in the background, like the one chained up, will actually not come to life until you seemingly pass it, so the first one you deal with, you'll be able to avoid. Just be ready when you see the second one, as you can outrun it if you like, or you can quickly turn around and mash it with the club. You can also hit the switch in the wall and immediately avoid any of these guys that may be chasing you down. Here we also are going to be using the first of the Gazoo abilities. Now, the Gazoo abilities are basically a very short-lived ability you can use that cost a lot of coins, but they're very useful in the areas we're going to need them in. The first one we're going to be using, though, is the Fly ability. Fred ends up getting giant wings and can actually fly up platforms, being able to avoid the quickly rising lava from below. In the next area, drop all the way down to the very bottom here, run across this hallway, and you'll probably have to take out this skeleton before you're able to advance. Quickly run across the bridge before the platforms that you're standing on end up falling down, take out a thief enemy, and then another one of the skeletons. It's a little bit of a tight area, so you'll probably have to deal with all the enemies that end up spawning before you end up reaching the staircase. After going up the staircase, immediately walk to the left and go up the next staircase to get onto the next screen. Here you'll have to climb up all the platforms by just jumping slightly near the edge of one of them, and then you can do a big jump here over to the right, climb up the platform, and have your club ready to take out the giant Frankenstein monster that will immediately start running towards you. Do a nice little jump and hit him with the club in order to take him out. Then drop down the big giant gap here and go into the door on the left. Here you'll end up doing battle with a Dracula creature. You'll have to use the club by charging it up and attack him as he goes from the upper left to the right, and then he goes to the bottom and does the same thing. If you hit him quickly enough, he'll immediately disappear before he ends up actually using any of his ability. Once you've actually taken care of him with 4 quick hits of a fully charged up shot, he'll be defeated and we move on to the next level. As expected, there's an underwater themed stage as well on this platformer, and it's kind of weird because you're not actually swimming and you don't have any kind of scuba gear or anything. So I guess we just chop it up to Gazoo giving Fred the ability to breathe underwater. And with water mechanics fully in effect, you'll be able to jump a lot higher and you'll float for a little bit as you're actually falling down in the water. You use this, of course, to your advantage to get over larger gaps than you normally would be able to jump to. It is cool, though, with the underwater level that there's a lot of new enemies in this stage, so you're not fighting the same ones we've been fighting. Be very careful when falling down this giant gap that you're able to land on some bubbles below. You'll have to jump along these bubbles as they're coming from the right wall, and you'll be able to keep jumping from bubble to bubble in order to advance. Eventually you'll be able to land on solid ground and have to make a big jump in order to land on the platform above. After walking across this one, do another huge jump in order to get up here. Watch out for the giant fish as you end up getting hit by one of them, but don't worry, there's no boss in this level in case you are low of health. Continue along this platform over to the right, and when you make it to what seems like a dead end, jump up into the air and you'll be able to climb on the platform and climb out of the water, completing the stage. We then move on to the next level, and this level is an Asian themed level, as you can see. There's bamboo forests, the Asian style houses, and even stereotypical Asian themed enemies. While probably no one really cared back then, I doubt this would fly nowadays, especially with the skin tone of some of these Asian enemies. While also this level is a little bit kind of out of place with the rest of the Stone Age themed stages, I still find this actually a really cool stage overall. You even have the mythical type creatures of the umbrella monsters, as well as you actually have sakura or cherry blossom trees in the background. Though I'm not sure if it's supposed to be China or Japan or just kind of a mix of both, with elements of both cultures being included in the stage, it seems like. The enemies here will take sometimes 2 shots with the club, especially if you're not able to hit them with a fully charged up hit from your club, so be careful and don't hit them once and try to run through them, you may end up taking unnecessary damage here. Over here, take out this enemy by just jumping up from the platform below, and you'll be able to climb up on the building. You'll then be able to move on to the next part of the screen and into a whole nother area of the level. Over here, jump up on here and then jump to the platform above. You'll have to take out the enemy pulling the cart, and you can actually jump on the cart and ride this. It's only a few seconds long, but I find this segment pretty cool, and you'll end up flying all the way across and landing on the boat. Of course, most boats, are going to look pretty much the same on the NES, but I always thought this boat in particular looked very similar to the boats from Super Mario 3. The boss of the level is a giant sumo dinosaur. Now, he has a decent amount of range with his tail, and he also spits out fireballs. He's also easily the toughest boss we've faced so far. Try to duck under the fireballs or jump over them and keep charging up your power club. After you have a fully charged up ability with the club, run in and attack him, and then back away before he's able to get you with some of his tail swipes. It'll take probably 6 or so hits to actually defeat him, and once you do so, we'll move on to the next level. But now we actually have a fully built time machine, so we're moving on to the future. Here we are in the future with conveyor belts moving very quickly, so be careful not to fall into the pit. After jumping across a couple of these, you end up running into George Jetson from the Jetsons. After talking to George, you end up jumping onto the elevator and riding it up inside of the giant building. Once inside, Butler ends up taunting us from this giant screen before we're able to continue. Now this is the final level of the game, and if you're used to conveyor belts and platforms, you won't have any trouble here. The arrows, of course, at the bottom of the platform will tell you which way the conveyor will pull you, so you'll have to use your momentum in order to make it over. Watch out for the spikes above you when you're jumping over these platforms, and when you make it up here, you'll have to watch out for the flames on the left side. At first you may not know exactly what to do here, but you'll have to use your ability of Gazoos in order to turn into the bird in order to jump up here. Once you fall down here after we switched out of the bird form, climb up once again with it in order to make it to the next conveyor belt. Make a nice big leap on the left side of the conveyor belt in order to make it to the elevator on the side. Once up here, you'll pretty much have the same thing from earlier, except instead of stuff falling down on us, we'll now be pushed up into stuff above us. Make a very long leap and be very careful. Unfortunately, I almost didn't make it there. And then continue along all these giant conveyor belts. Just a little bit of tricky platforming before you end up making it to another elevator. Once up here, you'll have to wait for the claw to come over for you to grab it, or you can just bypass it by using the bird ability once again. Before I end up transforming out of the ability after I run out of all my coins, I pretty much avoided most of the tricky platforming. Land here and take out the robot with 4 normal hits from the club before you climb up another elevator. Here you'll have conveyor belts pushing you, but you'll also have some bouncy enemies, so you'll either have to run under them or smack them with the club altogether. The robot enemy we took out earlier can easily be defeated with a fully charged up club, or he'll take several hits normally with just normal shots from the club. Just when he shoots the missiles, be sure to avoid them by jumping over them. After riding up the next elevator, we'll have some more platforming. Thankfully though, they end up giving you another piece of health that you can add to your meter if you need it at this point, as you're jumping across these very, very small platforms. There's also going to be some enemies above you that end up dropping those bouncy guys, so wait for the right opportunities before attempting to make more jumps. That little segment right there is probably one of the trickiest in the game just because of the small platforming. When you make it to the top though, it's time for the showdown against Butler. In Butler's first form, he ends up attacking you with some missiles from his missile launcher. Though, with a fully charged up club, you'll easily destroy the first part of him. He then goes into a giant mech. If you time your hits correctly with the giant club, you'll actually be able to destroy him before he's able to even get his ability out. He'll then go off screen and it's time for the final showdown. Here, do a fully charged up ability with your club and then jump up and attack the windshield of the giant mech. After a few hits, the glass around him will break, and then just deliver one more fully charged up shot in order to defeat Butler and complete the game. You can now sit back and enjoy the ending to the rescue of Dino and Hoppy. After a nice little ending, with of course the Flintstones returning to their own time, of course with Dino and Hoppy once again safe and sound, we then begin to roll our credits. Flintstones The Rescue of Dino and Hoppy may not be the most amazing or memorable platformer, but the colorful graphics, some of the cool abilities, still makes it a fun platformer to put into the NES. Taito did a good job with the license, and this ends up being just one of many platforming Flintstones games that were available around this time. Of course, there was the pseudo-sequel to this game, which ended up being one of the most rare NES titles available, as well as there was games released for Super Nintendo as well as the Sega Genesis, with the ones on the Sega Genesis also being some of my favorites. After the credits get done rolling, we have a presented by Taito screen, and with that, it's going to wrap up another edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.